Assalamualaikum, can you guys hear?
Assalamualaikum. You guys are ready? I'm going to take it live. And I'm almost ready. One second.
No, we're ready.
Okay, so I think the
Assalamualaikum. I'm ready, but I'm just going to turn on the
Salam
slide.
video is going to go first.
5 seconds.
The Salam video will go first.
You guys are ready? I'm going to take it live.
I think it's already live.
It is already live? Okay. Okay, here we go.
Should I get started?
Who's reading first? Or we?
Me some.
Okay.
Should I get started? Yes.
Bismillah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is the introduction of the Ayam Aza at IEC Husaini. This is the first of a series of lectures that are going to be my Moulana Syed Safi Haider at IC Husaini, 1st of Muharram. To start off this year, I would like to invite Brother Misam Jafri to recite Salam. Bawazibalan Salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajal.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. کربل کی کہانی کوئی بھی سنائے گا، دل والوں کی آنکھوں سے ایک دریا بہائے گا، وہ قافلہ سیف کا جو شان سے نکلا تھا، صغرا کو خبر کیا تھی، نہ لوٹ کے آئے گا، زہرا زہرا پرسال و بہتر کا، ٹوٹی ہے کمر شہ کی، گھبرانا مگر اکبر، ٹوٹی ہے کمر شہ کی، گھبرانا مگر اکبر، فرزند نبی تیری میت کو اٹھائے گا، زہرا زہرا اکبر کا بھی پرسالو، اور پامال ہوا کیسے جب گھوڑوں کی ٹاپوں سے، رے پامال ہوا کیسے جب گھوڑوں کی ٹاپوں سے، کس طرح چچا تیری میت کو اٹھائے گا، زہرا زہرا قاسم کا بھی پرسالو، تھا ہاتھوں کے کٹنے کا کچھ غم نہ دلاور کو، تھا ہاتھوں کے کٹنے کا کچھ غم نہ دلاور کو، سیدانیوں کا پیدا اب کون بچائے گا زہرا زہرا عباس کب سالو اور سرور نے اٹھائے تھے سب ساتھیوں کے لاشیں سرور نے اٹھائے تھے سب ساتھیوں کے لاشیں شبیر تیرا لاشا اب کون اٹھائے گا زہرا زہرا شبیر کب سالو زہرا زہرا سالو بہت کا اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد.
Jazakallah. I would now like to invite Brother Samar Abbas for recitation of Marsiya. Bawaz Baland Salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل
Muhammad.
اہل ازا کے دن پہنچے اہل ازا کے دن پہنچے غم کی راتیں غم کی راتیں بکا کے دن پہنچے فریاد کے فاطمہ کی بستی اجڑی آبادی کربلا کے یہ دن پہنچے اہل ازا.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
دو تین شعر سلام کے. چلے حسین مدینے سے کربلا کے لیے چلے حسین مدینے سے کربلا کے لیے اٹھے قدم تو اٹھے دین کی بقا کے لیے چلے حسین مدینے سے کربلا کے لیے انہی کے نقش قدم پر چلو مسلمانوں انہی کے نقش قدم پر چلو مسلمانوں عمل کرو ہو جو خوشنو دیے خدا کے لیے چلے حسین مدینے سے کربلا کے لیے ہمیں کے غم نہ روئے تو کون روئے گا ہمیں کے غم میں نہ روئے تو کون روئے گا خدا نے خلق کیا ہے ہمیں بکا خلق کیا ہے ہمیں بکا کے لیے چلے حسین مدینے سے کربلا کے لیے اٹھے قدم تو اٹھے دین کی بقا کے لیے چلے حسین مدینے سے
اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد
سورہ
اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد
گھر سے جب بہرے سفر سید عالم نکلے گھر سے جب بہرے سفر سید عالم نکلے سر جھکائے ہوئے بادیدہ پرنم نکلے قریش و فرزند پرا باندھ کے باہم نکلے رو کے فرمایا کہ اس شہر سے اب ہم نکلے رو کے فرمایا کہ اس شہر سے اب ہم نکلے رات سے گریے زہرا کی صدا آتی ہے دیکھ قسمت ہمیں کس دشت میں لے جاتی ہے کہ قسمت ہمیں کس دشت میں لے جاتی ہے. رکیا شین سوئے قبر شہنشاہ انا. بہر تسلیم جھکے متصل باب سلام. اذن پا کر جو گئے قبر کے نزدیک امام. اور عرض کی آیا ہے آج آخری رخصت کو غلام. عرض کی آیا ہے آج آخری رخصت کو غلام. یہ مکہ ہم سے اب اے شاہ زمن چھٹتا ہے. آج حضرت کے نواسے سے وطن چھٹتا ہے. اور آج حضرت کے نواسے سے وطن چھٹتا ہے. چین سے سب ہے گھروں میں ہمیں ملتا نہیں چین. سخت آفت میں پھنسا آپ کا یہ نور ہے. دل ہوتا ہے جب رو کے حرم کرتے ہیں بیر. ننھے بچوں کو بلا لے کے کدھر جائے حسین. ننھے بچوں کو بلا لے کے کدھر جائے حسین. شہر میں چین نہ جنگل میں امان ملتی ہے. اور دیکھیے قبر مسافر کو کہاں ملتی ہے. دیکھیے قبر مسافر کو کہاں ملتی ہے. ارے یہ بیان کر کے جو تعبیر سے لپٹے سرور. ارے یوں ہی قبر کے تھرائی دری ہے انور. آئی تربت سے یہ آواز حبیب داور. تیری غربت کے میں صدقے میرے مظلوم پسر. تیری غربت کے میں صدقے تیرے مظلوم پسر. کوئی سمجھا نہ میری گود کا پالا تجھ کو. اور ہائے آدان مدینے سے نکالا تجھ کو. ہائے آدان مدینے سے نکالا تجھ کو. سن کے یہ شہر کیا آخری رخصت کا سلام. اور نکلے روتے ہوئے اس روزے انور سے امام. شہر سے زینب نے یہ اس دم کیا رو رو کے کلام. اور قبر پہ ماں کی مجھے لے چلو یا شاہ انا. اور قبر پہ ماں کی مجھے لے چلو یا شاہ انا. جی میں ارماں ہے کہ دل کھول کے دم بھر رو لوں. ماں کی تربت سے پھر ایک بار لپٹ کر رو لوں. پھر ماں کی تربت سے پھر ایک بار لپٹ کر رو لوں. ارے ماں کی تربت پہ گئے شاہ بچشمے خوبا. ارے اتری میں مل سے بسد آہو فغاں زینب زاد. دوڑ کر قبر سے لپٹے جو امام ابرار. اور ہاتھ زہرا کے نکل آئے لحد سے ایک بار. ہاتھ زہرا کے نکل آئے لحد سے ایک بار. آئی آواز نہ رو دل پہ کلک ہوتا है कलेजा मेरा शक होता है घर से जब पहले सफर सैयद आलम निकले
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Jazakallah. I would like to first welcome Moulana Syed Safi Haider Abidi, who is going to be reciting from New Jersey. He is a scholar, community leader, activist, speaker, and a chaplain at New York Presbyterian Hospital. He did his bachelor's from William Patterson University and a master's in religious studies from Hartford Seminary. He is currently pursuing a doctorate in ministry from New York Theological Seminary in pastoral counseling. The Syed started his religious studies with summer classes with Moulana Mehboob of IEC. He officially started his whole studies with Ayatollah Sayyid Hussain Sajdi and is furthering his whole studies currently with Ayatollah Sayyid Hussain Sabri. The topics for his Majalis series for the first 5 lectures are going to be the origins and doctrines of Shi'ism, and the Majlis 6 to 10 are going to be on Marifat al-Nafs and al-Irfan in Shiism. I would like everybody to recite Allah salawat from their homes and from their hearts for Moulana as he starts the Majlis. Awaz balan salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وصلى اللهم على آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين. قال الله الحكيم في القرآن الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإن من شيعته لإبراهيم صلاة على محمد وآل محمد. When we discuss the idea of religion, it is very important for us to note that religion and religious identity and affiliation has a historical context through which the religion was revealed. For example, when we talk about Christianity, it is with the presumption that Christianity grew out of the framework of Judaism. And when we talk about Judaism, we talk about Judaism in relationships to other faiths that existed at the time. Where in the case of Judaism, they would say that the God of the Jews is one God, but he is not the God for all the other nations and tribes. He is one God, and the Jews alone are responsible for worshiping him. In response to that, we have the development of Christianity whereby Jesus comes, Jesus is born in the miraculous situation, and there are differences between the Quranic and the biblical conception of the birth of Jesus, where in the Quran, Bibi Maryam goes off into the desert to give birth, whereas in the Bible, she is in the manger at Nazareth. That is why Jesus is called Jesus of Nazareth, or some of the earlier Christian sects were called Nazarenes, because Jesus himself was born, according to the Christian tradition, in the land of Nazareth. Christianity grew out of Judaism, whereas Judaism was about laws, Christianity was about love. Whereas Judaism was about the physical erection of a temple of Solomon, Christianity was about making the heart the temple and the body the temple of God through which God is worshipped. And similarly, when we talk about the ideas of Islam, we have to understand that Islam grew out of a historical context. And indeed, this is something that Muslims have to learn. When we talk about the idea of history, for example, sacred history, for example. The idea that the biblical understanding of history can be taken as a literal understanding of what happened in history itself. Especially when it comes to the land of Israel, and especially when it comes to the life of Jesus. When it comes to the prophet, the Christians and Jews treat, for the Jews, the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible, and for the Christians, the whole Bible, as verbatim the historical doctrine and a historical document. Muslims, however, are lacking in that, and indeed we find that one of the major problems of modern man is the elimination or the exiting of what is called sacred history to the reality of the human being, where in the norm or in the way of scientific knowledge or in the way of progress, we do away with all recognitions of the connection between religion and life. Anything sacred becomes completely unscientific or unanalytic or unacademic or unhuman. Therefore, it is not able to be understood. When we talk about this, though, this is one of the biggest fallings of the modern man, where they do not understand that sacred history, yes, there are faults even in sacred history. But sacred history itself is an understanding of the implementation of the divinity in history, whether it is the Hebrew Bible, the New Testament, or the Quran. And indeed, we have sacred history that goes after, for Christians, for Jews, Moses, and for Christians, Jesus, and for Muslims after Muhammad. And that is the human element in sacred history that creates the biggest error. Yes, we have to say this openly, that the atrocities that existed and that happened in the names of religions are many. And they are not disengaged from sacred history. The Crusades happened. That's a part of Christian sacred history, yes. What happened after the prophet is a part of sacred history as well. And we need to understand what happens after the prophet if we are going to understand the sources and the development and the bedrock of our usul al-din when it comes to not only history or for what happened in the past, but also to the new situations that we are facing in everyday situations. And indeed, one of the aspects of sacred history is the origins of Shi'ism within the sacred history of Islam. So, for example, when we talk about sacred history now, after the prophet, first of all, sacred history incorporates what happened in the life of the prophet or during the time of the prophet. So, the prophet knew what was going to happen after him. And he understood it. And it is a discussion that I entail to expand upon for the next 5-6 lectures as to the origins of Shi'ism within history, and more specifically in relationship to what the Prophet and the Imams have said about the historical development of our aqaid. When we talk about sacred history, we have to understand that the mistakes of the Muslims during the time of the Prophet are a part of that sacred history. And we have to understand that the Prophet knew, he understood, he comprehended what certain factions of the Muslim body were doing, both good and bad. He understood all of it. Within the Prophet's companion themselves, there was a group of companions, Salman, Miqdad, Abu Dhar, Ammar, and a few others, who loved the praise of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and indeed in the life of the Prophet they were called Shi'at Ali. And we need to understand that I don't mean necessarily a Shia in the sense of capital S Shia. The development of a faith takes generations and centuries and millennia, or thousands of years. But there was a group during the life of the Prophet that were known as the Shia of Ali. And every time they would gather in the mahfil, they would start reciting the praises of Imam Ali, and their faces would get lightened up. They would get happy. They would show happiness, comfort, satisfaction, all the positive emotions, they would show it. So when we talk about this sacred history, we have to understand that there were those people. But there were people within the Muslim world or the time of the Prophet that did not agree to everything that the Prophet had done. Obviously, there were those who said, Hasbuna Kitab Allah, that the book of Allah is enough for us, that this Muhammad has gone mad, that this Muhammad has gone mad. And therefore, there was a group of individuals who knew that the Prophet Muhammad had at multiple times appointed Ali ibn Abi Talib as his successor. And when Ali ibn Abi Talib was appointed as his successor, this created angst and anxiety for those who were against the nomination process of Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhim. Those who were against it, they were plotting their own plots. Within this sacred history, we have to understand that there were many assassination attempts on the Prophet. Not just the night of Hijrah, many times in Medina, the Jews tried to kill the Prophet. And Allah protected him. Allah safeguarded him. When we talk about this idea of the origins of Shi'ism and the origins of Islam, first of all, we have to understand that in order to have the full understanding of sacred history, Islamic sacred history, and I'll say this paraphrase and then go back to the succession incidents during the life of the Prophet and what happened right after the Prophet. Islamic sacred history begins with the creation of the Prophet himself, his light. أَوَّلُ مَا خَلَقَ اللَّهُ نُورِي أَوَّلُ مَا خَلَقَ اللَّهُ الْحَقِّ. The first thing that Allah created was my light. The first thing that Allah created was the truth. The truth was the Muhammadan reality, and the Muhammadan reality was the truth. And of course, أَنَا وَعَلِيٌّ مِّن نُورٍ وَاحِدٍ حَسَنٌ مِنِّي Hussain minni, Fatimatu bid'atu minni, that these are part of me. So now people knew that Imam Ali had already been pointed out as his successor from the very start of Islam. And then, of course, there was angst amongst the Quraysh. There were many of those who were against the nomination of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And they understood that the nomination of Amir al-Mu'mineen would do away with any hope for power and wealth that they ever had. And indeed, to try to create rift and division and sedition in the Muslim world, they, after the Prophet had left this world, met at Saqifa, Banu Sa'ida. And at the place called Saqifa of Banu Sa'ida, they had a discussion or a debate as to who the Khalifa would be. Going back a little bit, when the Prophet, in our traditions, they would say that the Prophet left this world in the house of Fatima Zahra. In some Sunni traditions, they say it was the house of Bibi Aisha. Regardless, Abu Bakr was away at that time. And Umar ibn al-Khattab was there. He took out his sword and he said that whoever says Muhammad is dead, I'm going to kill him. When the to-be first Khalifa came back, he said, to calm things down, according to our brothers, that for those of you who think Muhammad is dead, know that Muhammad is dead, but the God of Muhammad is alive. The famous Khatib, Moulana Muntazir Abbas Naqvi Marhum, used to say that Abu Bakr said, for those of you who used to worship Muhammad, know that Muhammad is dead. And that the God of Muhammad, but that the God of Muhammad is still alive. When they met at Saqifa, there was a debate because the Ansar and the Muhajirin had clashes amongst them in this debate as to who would be Khalifa. The Muhajirin had already chosen, they had selected basically Imam Ali, saying that if Ali is Khalifa, then we will accept him. But the Ansar, rather, the Muhajirin said that they elected their own Khalifa. And then the Ansar said, let's have one Khalifa from the Ansar and one Khalifa from the Muhajirin. And then they said that the Muhajirin said that none of the Arabs would accept that the Khilafat go to the people of Medina, because the Quraysh are the highest ranking among the people of the Arab world, of the Arabian Peninsula. Therefore they say, let us be the Khalifa and let you be the Wazir. And I'm not just talking about this from the perspective of a Shia history book. This is in Tariq al-Tabari, for example. Of course, and then they say that Imam Ali alayhi salatu wassalam was taking in the final prayers of the final rites of Rasulullah. And then when we talk about this, we have to understand that the whole mission of the Prophet of Islam, that is why I'm talking about the origins of Shi'ism when it comes to in relationship specifically to our aqaid and our belief systems, that we have to understand that the message of 124,000 prophets was the idea of La ilaha illallah. We have to understand that the message of 124,000 prophets was La ilaha illallah, not the idea but the reality of La ilaha illallah, and the haqiqat of La ilaha illallah, and the essence of La ilaha illallah, that the culmination of 124,000 prophets minus Prophet Muhammad was Muhammad himself. He was the culmination of Adam, the culmination of Nuh, the culmination of Jesus, the culmination of Abraham, the culmination of Moses, the culmination of David, the culmination of Sulaiman. Recite salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. He was the culmination of all of their efforts. And this whole message was the message of La ilaha illallah. All the prophets taught La ilaha illallah. And all the kalimas that were revealed had the first shahada as La ilaha illallah. The Prophet Muhammad's message was La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. The first clause starts with the negation of all of the deities. La ilaha, there is no God. You see, when Prophet Muhammad declared this La ilaha illallah to the Arabs, they did not have a problem with La ilaha. There is no God. Their problem was with illallah, because they had created a whole system of oppression and dhulm and caste and hierarchy, Arab, Ajam, Quraysh, non-Quraysh. And they themselves were the key holders of this hierarchical system. When we talk about this hierarchical system, it is very, very important for us to note that Prophet Muhammad did not mean just, and the Arabs knew this, when he said, La ilaha illallah, there's no God but God, he broke the back of the oppressive systems of that time. Whether it was Lat or Uzza or Manat, whether it was the Quraysh hierarchy between Quraysh and Non, whether it was Arab and Ajam, he broke all those barriers. And indeed, the first converts to Islam, many of them were slaves, and the Prophet had freed them himself. He would buy people to free them. And then he would say, there is no God but Allah. There is no God but God. And of course, when we talk about God, in terms of an aqaid, we have to understand the very nature of God incorporates within it a discussion of Islamic spirituality and mysticism. When we talk about God, we have to understand God is wahdat al-wujud and wajib al-wujud. Wahdat al-wujud, and the famous Safavid philosopher Mullah Sadruddin al-Shirazi, he mentions this by saying that God is such, there is no second to him. Or rather that his, obviously there is no second to him, but rather that his essence is not separated from his sifat. Sifat cannot be separated from the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he developed his own philosophy behind it. And of course, the statements of the prophets are numerous. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one. He was the first before there was a first before him. He was the first before there was a first. He is the last, and after there will be no last. Beholders are not able to perceive him or see him. No scientific tool is about to put him under analysis. No calculator can comprehend him or figure out his limits. God was first before there was a first, and he created without there being anything to be created out of. God was the first, and he was the first creator. When he created, there was nothing there, and out of this nothing came something. In a point of absolute singularity, in the most dense energy that expanded in the words of the Big Bang, in the name of the Big Bang, the universe was created. God is the ultimate creator, and he is the ultimate sustainer. He is the ultimate nourisher, and he is the ultimate maker. He is the ultimate provider. He is the ultimate judge. He is the ultimate harbinger. He is the ultimate Lord. He is the ultimate Malik. He is the ultimate Rabb. When we talk about God, therefore, we have to understand that it is God within this context that we're talking about. One of the stories during the life of the Prophet is that a Jew by the name of Na'athal came to the Prophet. This is mentioned in Bihar. It's mentioned in Bihar that the Prophet was approached by this Jew, and he said, "O Muhammad, I have certain questions about your God. If you answer them, then I will accept Islam." He answered them, and of course, he accepted Islam. God is such not only is he wahdat al-wujud, he's wajib al-wujud. He is the only thing that necessarily needs to exist. In the words of Imam Ali alayhi salam, Anta al-baqi wa ana al-fani. You are the everlasting, I am the perisher. Everything will perish except the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, except the wajh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything is not except God. Everything is not except God. Everything is destroyed except God. God is such that He does not need anything. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. Say He is God, the One, God the Needless. He begets not, nor is He begotten, and there is none like unto Him. God is the incomparable. That is why Amir al-Mu'minin says no calculator is able to calculate Him. Beholders' eyes are not able to perceive Him. God is such, according to the mystical traditions, that He is closer to a man than his jugular vein. But even then, the beholder's eye is not able to comprehend Him. It is only the heart of the individual that is able to comprehend God. It is only the heart of the human being that is able to comprehend God, to the extent that any living creature can, I should add. When this heart reaches its apogee, its height, its apex, the apex of this heart is the heart of Insanul Kamil. Insanul Kamil is that person who is the manifestation completely in its entirety of the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the embodiment of a human being. When we talk about this Insanul Kamil, it is the wali of Allah in a different word that we are talking about. يا أيها الذين آمنوا أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم. This wali al-amr, according to Shia mystical traditions, they say that the world was created for wali al-amr. And if the world was even for a microsecond deprived of the existence of Wali al-Amr, the whole universe, all of creation would be completely destroyed within that microsecond. Within a single microsecond, the world would be destroyed. This world was created, therefore, for Insanul Kamil. And Insanul Kamil's heart is the only receptacle of the divine presence that could ever be possible. When the divine presence was put on the mountaintops raised to the ground. Nothing of the creation accepted the divine covenant between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The only thing that accepted the divine covenant with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the human being. And it is the human being that is the most arrogant. Truly. Truly. It is the most arrogant of all beings. When we talk about Allah, all the pictures and images of Allah in the Christian world are of a human being that is God for them. Jesus himself, the famous orator and Ayatollah Tasdiq al-Gharbi in his Urdu lectures, in comparing the way Jesus was revered to the Christians, to the way the Muslims treated Prophet Muhammad, he says that ईसाइयों ने हज़रत ईसा को इतना बुलंद किया, इतना बुलंद किया, इतना बुलंद किया कि उन्होंने उनको खुदा और खुदा का बेटा बना दिया। और मुसलमानों ने हुजूर को इतना नीचे किया, इतना गिराया, इतना गिराया, इतना गिराया कि हुजूर आम इंसान लगने शुरू हो गए। It is very sad for us to say that the Muslims degraded the Prophet so much that he got perceived as just an ordinary human being, whereas he is the embodiment of Insan al-Kamil. Insan al-Kamil is not a position that anybody has. Of course, within the idea of Insan al-Kamil, it would be unjust of God to choose who the Insan Hai Kamil would be. Every human being has the propensity of becoming Insan al-Kamil. But most human beings, they are like rabid dogs or animals, not really comprehending the full weight of the divine promise that has been made when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. Allah says to the malaika that I will appoint a vicegerent on this earth. The malaika complained to God, saying that will you appoint somebody who is to create mischief and wrongdoing and shed blood on this earth? He says, Inni ya'lamu ma la ta'lamun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates Adam, and then he says, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا, taught Adam all the names of every reality. And then he says they were taught all the names of every single reality. When that happened, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered all the angels to prostrate before Adam, and he asked them, did I not tell you that I knew what was in the heavens and this earth, and that is between this earth and everything? In the du'as of Namaz al-Shab, one of the du'as is Subhanallah Rabbil Samawati Sab'a wa Rabbil Ardina Sab'a wa ma fihinna wa ma baynahunna wa Rabbil Arsh al-Azim wa Rabbil Aradina Sab'a wa Rabbil Samawati Sab'a. I mistook the order. But then they say, Lord of the seven earths and the Lord of the seven skies. Lord, He knows everything. When the angels realized that they had no knowledge of these names, they performed sajda to Adam at the command of their Lord. Iblis did not. And when asked by Allah why he did not, he says, خَلَقْتَهُ مِن نَارٍ وَخَلَقْتَهُ مِن طِينٍ. You created me from fire and you created him from earth. The problem was not just fire and earth. He says the problem was even Iblis did not know the realities of those names. Those names were such that Iblis did not know them. He did not know of the names. Only he saw the physical body of Adam and he saw that he was created from earth. He thought fire was higher than earth, therefore he refused such that. And Allah kicked him out of his paradise completely. When Allah kicks him out, it is not the kicking out of Iblis, just that. It is the fulfillment of the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa. And the fall of Adam is a manifestation of the descent of man from God to this world. For 300 years, Nabi Adam cries. And then Allah gives him some kalimat, and he repents, and his repentance is accepted. When his repentance is accepted, of course, we know that these are ayam of Aza of Imam Hussain. Going back to the topic for today, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created 124,000 prophets, all their message was La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Adam to Khatam. Khatam's Nabuwa, Khatamun Nabiyeen's Nabuwa, the culmination of that point is a place called Ghadir Khum, where not only did Prophet Muhammad stop all of his companions who were there, he told them to wait for those who are behind them, and to wait for to come meet them, and wait for those who are ahead of them to come back to them. This is a symbol for us that you can never go before the Prophet, you can never lag behind the Prophet. You have to constantly be with and follow the Prophet and his Ahlul Bayt. This is the manifestation of the Aqeedah of the love of Prophet Muhammad and his family. When he says this is an example for us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's example. And then Prophet Muhammad, they wait. Prophet Muhammad says, no. Erect a mimbar. And they say, Ya Rasulullah, this is a desert. How are we going to erect a mimbar? Imam Ali is to be appointed successor. So Prophet Muhammad wants to make this an extra special occasion. When they are there, he says, take the balan, which is not the saddle, but the structure that is on top of the saddle out, and make a mimbar out of this balan, as we call it in Urdu. There's a shair that a family friend of ours wrote. He lives in Atlanta, goes to the Abbas. He says, Utare ja rahe hain oot se palan mimbar mein, Ghadir Khum ke mimbar ka ye sama dekhte jao. That the palan of the camels are being dismounted from the camel, and they are being made into a mimbar. Look at the strangeness of this mimbar. Just look at the awe of this mimbar. That its saman is the palan of the mimbar, of the camel. When this happens, Prophet Muhammad goes up, and Imam Ali is right next to him. He says to them that I have been told that I'm going to leave you soon. And then, of course, the famous statements, Inni tarikum fikum al-thaqalain, kitab Allahi wa itrati ahl bayti. I leave with you two weighty things, the book of Allah and my Ahlul Bayt. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is about to depart this world, he nominates the wilayat of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam as part of his message. When Ali ibn Abi Talib is appointed, the whole world, the whole Muslim world knows that Ali is the successor. And for them, it might have been easy to disvalue Amir al-Mu'mineen as successor. But imagine what it must have been like for Fatima al-Zahra. Imagine what it must have been like for the companions of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Imagine what it must have been like for the companions of Rasulullah, who were the actual companions of Rasulullah. Imagine what it must have been like. When we talk about the nature of the message of Islam, it is complete submission to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is in this message that we see that the life of this world is nothing, it's transient. The life of the Akhirah is what is most important. On the night of the 27th of Rajab, Aba Abdullah al-Hussain salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayh is about to leave Medina. My professor, one of my academic mentors, Dr. Mahmoud Ayub, I believe this is in his thesis, Redemptive Suffering in Islam, when Imam Hussain was told that Muawiyah had died and Yazid was appointed Khalifa, and the whole incident of the night of the 27th of Rajab happened, that Aba Abdullah al-Hussain, he went to his grandfather's grave and he cried. He cried so much that he fell asleep. In that book, Dr. Mahmoud Ayub continues to write that in his dream he saw Rasulullah, and he says, Rasulullah says to his grandson Imam Hussain that, "Oh Hussain, Allah has saved a position for you in the Akhirah that you cannot attain except through martyrdom." Aba Abdullah al-Hussain wakes up and then he says that if this is the will of Allah, then I accept it. Aba Abdullah al-Hussain, 124,000 different prophets, their whole mission, their whole life's work, their whole mission, their whole motto was La ilaha illallah, and Hussain is the embodiment of 124,000 prophets. Why we say in Ziyarat Waratha, Assalamu alayka ya Waratha Adam Safatillah, Assalamu alayka ya Waratha Nuhin Nabiyullah, Assalamu alayka ya Waratha Ibrahim Khalilullah, Assalamu alayka ya Waratha Musa Kalimullah, Assalamu alayka ya Waratha Isa Ruhullah. If you want to see Adam, you look at Hussain. If you want to see Nuh, you look at Hussain. If you want to see Ibrahim, you look at Hussain. If you want to see Musa, you look at Hussain. If you want to see Isa, you look at Hussain. If you want to see Assalamu alayka ya Muhammad and Habibullah, if you want to see Muhammad, you look at Hussain. Assalamu alayka ya Waritha Amir al-Mu'mineen. Assalamu alayka ya Waritha Fatimatu Zahra. Assalamu alayka. Assalamu alayka ya Hussain. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Aba Abdullah al-Hussain alayhi salatu wa salam is about to, this is the night of the 27th of Rajab. He was on the Prophet's grave crying and lamenting. He fell asleep, like I said, and he saw the dream. He gets up. Now, like I said, 124,000 prophets, their message is La ilaha illallah. Hussein's message is the culmination of all of their efforts. Hussein's message is the culmination of La ilaha illallah. And Hussain says, imagine being Hussain, that if he is just by his grandfather's grave, he is in the city of Medina, he is by his brother's grave, he is by his mother's grave, he is by Masjid al-Nabi, he is by Abdullah and the Qilla Bani Hashim, Qabila Bani Hashim. He says, if it takes for me to save this religion, if I have to leave my grandfather's grave, La ilaha illallah, I will leave my grandfather's grave. If I have to leave my brother's grave, La ilaha illallah, I will leave my brother's grave. If I have to leave my mother's grave, La ilaha illallah, I will leave my mother's grave. If I need to leave my grandfather's masjid, I will leave his masjid. Aba Abdullah al-Hussain alayhi salatu wassalam. Remember now, my brothers and sisters, in the Indo-Pak tradition, the Rawanagi is one of the most tragic moments in the life of Imam Hussain. that start the journey to Karbala. Remember, Abu Abdullah al-Hussain salamullahi alayh, they are told by some members of his family that, "O Mawla, O Master, if you are going to go, but why are you taking the women and the children?" And then Imam Hussain says, "Allah, my message will not be completed without the women and the children." So the women go to, on the 27th of Rajab, or the 28th of Rajab, Imam Hussain in the morning, all of his camp, all of his Musafirin Karbala are getting on their rides. It comes time for the women to mount their rides, to mount their balan. And it is said that when Layla came out, Ali Akbar ran to the help of his mother. When Farwa came out, Qasim ran to the help of his mother. When Rubab came out, someone went to help her. When Fadl came out, Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas came to help her. There was one woman who, when she came out to mount her ride, when she came out, Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas ran to help her. Ali Akbar ran to help her. Qasim ran to help her. Abu Abdullah al-Hussain ran to help her. That was none other than Aqilat al-Bani Hashim, Sayyidah Zainab salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayha. When Abu Abdullah al-Hussain, he has a sick daughter, she comes out, Fatima al-Sughra. She said, "Father, if you are going, Imam Hussain does not take her." And there is a raz behind this not taking her. Imam Hussain knew what was going to happen to the women after him. Fatima al-Zuhra used to look exactly like Fatima al-Zahra, and he could not stand even after losing his life, that Fatima al-Zuhra, who was the exact copy of Fatima al-Zahra, would be paraded throughout the bazaars at Kufa and Sham. He could not withstand it. He could not bear it. Therefore, she comes to her father, and she says, "Oh, Father Hussain, if you are going, go. Leave Ali Asghar with me." Ali Asghar was a newborn, 2 weeks old maximum baby, who was in the arms of Fatima al-Sughra. Imam Hussain, salamullahi alayh, he goes to the ear of Ali ibn al-Asghar. He says something in the ear of Ali ibn al-Asghar. Ali ibn al-Asghar jumps from the cradle, from the lap or from the arms of Fatima al-Sughra to the hands of Imam Hussain. I don't know what Imam Hussain told Ali ibn al-Asghar, but I believe and I think that it was him saying, "Ali ibn al-Asghar, your shahadat is written for you in Karbala." Ali ibn al-Asghar ran for shahadat. That is not all, my friends. Imam Hussain, first he makes the intention of performing the Hajj. But then when he goes, he finds out that Yazid would sacrifice the hurmat of the Kaaba and kill Imam Hussain in the Kaaba. Therefore, on Yawm al-Arafat, we have the famous dua recited by Imam Hussain on the day of Arafat. May Allah bless us all with the blessing of performing a Hajj. When Imam Hussain decides to leave Mecca, it is on the plains of Arafat that he makes his final announcement that he is leaving from Mecca to Kufa. Inna Allah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. ماتم حسين يا حسين يا حسين.
محمد کا گھرانہ کربلا والے بیاباں میں، 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 قیامت کی فضا چھائی ہے زہرا کے گلستان میں،
محمد کا گھرانہ کربلا والے بیاباں میں، محمد کا گھرانہ کربلا والے بیاباں میں،
کہاں ہو تم علی اکبر ذرا آواز تو دینا، کہاں ہو تم علی اکبر ذرا آواز تو دینا، اکیلا رہ گیا ہے فاطمہ کا لال میدان میں،
محمد کا گھرانہ کربلا والے بیاباں میں، محمد کا گھرانہ کربلا والے بیاباں میں،
محمد کے گھرانے پہ یہ کیسا انقلاب آیا، محمد کے گھرانے پہ یہ کیسا انقلاب آیا، علی کی بیٹیاں شام کے تاریخ کس زندان میں،
محمد کا گھرانہ کربلا والے بیاباں میں، محمد کا گھرانہ کربلا والے بیاباں میں،
زمین کربلا اس کو ذرا آرام سے رکھنا، زمین کربلا اس کو ذرا آرام سے رکھنا، سلایا ہے علی اصغر کو لا کر تیرے دامن میں،
محمد کا گھرانہ کربلا والے بیاباں میں، محمد کا گھرانہ کربلا والے بیاباں میں،
جو لوٹا کربلا میں تو مسلمانوں نے کیا لوٹا، جو لوٹا کربلا میں تو مسلمانوں نے کیا لوٹا، علی کی بیٹیوں کی چادر ساما میں،
محمد کا گھرانہ کربلا والے بیاباں